On July 24, 2026, a new order left the White House. It did not close a museum or remove an object. It directed the National Park Service to put temporary warning signs on the walkways outside the National Museum of American History.
The administration says visitors should be warned about what it calls inaccurate information and directed to a White House report. That report argues the museum gives too much weight to injustice and too little to a coherent, inspiring national story. Those are the administration's judgments, not settled findings.
The museum's director rejects the description of its leaders as radical activists, and the institutional boundary matters. The Smithsonian is not an ordinary department controlled by the president. Congress placed its administration in a board of regents drawn from public officials and private citizens. So the signs will stand in a peculiar place, outside a museum, on federal walkways, telling visitors to distrust a story inside. But beneath the political argument is a question every museum faces. When millions of events are connected, which connections become the story?
Consider a transaction often taught as a neat date, the Louisiana Purchase, 1803. The United States bought a vast territory from France. On a simple timeline, negotiators sign and a map changes color. But the chain that made the sale possible began far from Washington, among enslaved people in Saint-Domingue.
In 1791, enslaved people rose against one of the world's richest plantation colonies. Years of revolution followed. Leaders changed sides. European empires fought. Former slaves built armies. In 1802, Napoleon sent a major expedition to restore French control, and ultimately, slavery.
The French confronted determined resistance. They also confronted an ecological enemy, yellow fever, carried by mosquitoes. Many local fighters had some acquired immunity. Many newly arrived European soldiers did not. Disease devastated the expedition, but disease alone did not choose the outcome.
With the Caribbean campaign collapsing, war with Britain returning, and money urgently needed, Napoleon abandoned his larger North American project. France offered Louisiana. Haitian resistance, mosquito ecology, European rivalry, imperial ambition, and finance converged on one treaty in Paris.
Remove any one link, and history might look different. But that does not mean every link carried equal weight or that the outcome was inevitable. A useful historical account shows the chain and its uncertainties. A weak one points to a single signature and calls the job complete.
A second chain began with no cabinet decision at all. In April 1815, Mount Tambora, in present-day Indonesia, erupted with extraordinary violence. Material blasted into the atmosphere. The largest effects were local and catastrophic. But particles and gases also altered conditions far beyond the island.
In 1816, parts of the northern hemisphere endured abnormal cold, rain, frost, and failed harvests, the year without a summer. Tambora was a major cause. It was not the only influence on every place, and scientists still distinguish global averages from wildly different local experiences.
A temperature change becomes history through ordinary systems. A late frost kills grain. Less grain reaches a market. Prices rise. A household eats less. A government opens or fails to open relief. Roads and ports decide what food can move. Existing poverty decides who has no reserve.
The eruption did not write the same story everywhere. Geography shaped weather. Crops differed. Markets and institutions differed. People adapted, migrated, traded, prayed, protested, or endured. The mountain altered possibilities. Human systems distributed the consequences.
This is why the most memorable anecdote is not always the strongest evidence. A stormy summer may sit beside a famous novel or invention, but proximity is not proof. The harder and more revealing work follows weather records, harvests, prices, policies, letters, and movements of people.
The third chain begins with a gunshot. On June 28, 1914, Gavrilo Princip assassinated Archduke Franz Ferdinand and Sophie in Sarajevo. The killing was a trigger. It was not a complete explanation for a war that soon drew in much of Europe and then the world.
Behind the motorcade stood rival national projects, imperial competition, military expansion, domestic pressures, and alliances built over decades. After the assassination came an ultimatum, diplomatic messages, mobilization orders, and repeated decisions by leaders who still had choices.
The alliances did not operate like falling dominoes with no human hands. Governments interpreted commitments and threats. Some hoped a limited conflict could stay limited. Others feared that waiting would leave them weaker. Each decision changed the choices visible to the next government.
Then, technology tightened the clock. Mobilizing millions of soldiers depended on detailed railway schedules. Once trains began moving, reversing them was difficult. Telegraphs accelerated demands and replies. Industrial systems made mass war possible, while plans built around those systems made delay feel dangerous.
It is dramatic to say railway timetables caused the First World War. It is more accurate to say they constrained decision-makers who had built strategies around speed. A murder, an alliance, a timetable, and a telegram mattered because people and institutions connected them.
Now return to the museum. A display case cannot contain every chain. A label has a few sentences. Curators choose a starting point, a scale, and the voices allowed to speak. Selection is unavoidable. Fabrication is not. Evidence places limits on any responsible story.
One public tradition asks national museums to strengthen a shared inheritance, achievement, sacrifice, ideals, and cohesion. Another asks them to reveal who paid the costs, whose records were excluded, and how power shaped the archive. These purposes can compete. They can also correct each other's blind spots.
A warning sign is itself an interpretation. So is the exhibition beyond it. The useful question is not whether either has a point of view. It is whether claims are sourced, alternatives are visible, uncertainty is admitted, and new evidence can force a revision.
The past does not change. Our map of it does. A treaty can lead back to a revolution and a mosquito. A food price can lead across the atmosphere to a volcano. A train platform can lead into diplomacy, industry, fear, and choice.
Outside the Smithsonian, the new signs will ask visitors to question the history they are about to see. Perhaps that instinct should travel in every direction, toward the museum, toward the warning, and toward our own favorite stories. History is not one line. It is the work of seeing the connections without inventing them.